Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a new backpacking tent from Kazoo Outdoors, so let's get started. Alright guys, so before we get started with the specs, I'd like to empty out the stuff sack and get all the contents out on the table to show you guys what comes with the tent. So let's open it up here. Now I have been using this quite a bit, so it may even still be a little bit wet. And more on that a little later on. So right off the bat, we have the tent body. We've got the top of the rain fly. So this is still a little bit wet. I was actually out in a rainstorm just last night. So very happy to announce that I do enjoy this tent. So we'll get that out of the way. So that's the top of the tent, the little tiny rain fly. We have the empty stuff sack. There are a few instructions on the inside on how it's supposed to set up. So if you do need a little bit of help, there is some right there. And then inside of the tent body, so it does come with this little compression strap, which is actually very, very handy to have. But inside of the tent body and the rain fly, both are attached. I have the tent poles and the tent pegs. So I've got a bag of 3 aluminum poles. And then I've got a bag of, I think, about 10 stakes. And like I said, the outer tent is attached to the inner tent. However, it can be removed depending on how you want to set it up. All right, so coming into the stuff sack for the tent pegs, we have a whole bunch of Y stakes. Now, like I said, things are going to be dirty. I do use this tent quite a bit. So these are black Y stakes. They do have some fluorescent and reflective guyot material on the ends to better spot them in the dark and to help pull them out of the ground. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stakes included. So we'll get those off to the side. And then we'll have a look at these tent poles. These are very high quality aluminum. There are 3 pole sections in total. And they're fairly standardized with these little ends that are basically standard on all backpacking tents nowadays. Like I said, there are 3 poles included, and they're silver in color. All right, so one additional piece that I almost forgot to cover is the ground sheet, which is totally dirty right now, absolutely covered in mud, but it is a very high quality piece of equipment, coupled with a lot of these aluminum tabs which correspond with the pegs, allowing you to pitch this tent fast and light without the inner. As I said, you could pitch it in multiple configurations. So on my phone right here, I have the current listing pulled up on Amazon.ca. I'm just going to read a bit of the specs off to you, and then we're going to move into the setup process. So the tent stands 3.28 feet tall, which is 1 meter. It is 3.94 feet wide, which is 1.2 meters. And the doorway, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we set this up, but the doorway, the width of that area is 4.59 feet, which is 1.4 meters. So it's kind of an odd shaped tent. It doesn't really have a defined width or length. You'll see more when I set it up what I'm talking about. Now, the weight is 2.4 kilograms. That's everything included, which is also known as 5.29 pounds. It is made out of a 210 ripstop PU 3000 millimeters, so it's fairly up there on the scale of waterproofness, and everything is seam tape. Now, I had this out just last night in a massive thunderstorm, and I did not get wet at all inside of this tent, which is why I'm now bringing it to you guys to review, because that was my final testing phase, was a massive downpour of rain, and it passed phenomenally. Very happy with that. It does come with 6 guy lines, which I've already pre-attached to the tent body itself, so we'll have a look at that when we set the tent up. The packed dimensions inside of the stuff sack are 6.69 inches in diameter and 18.9 inches long. And I believe that is about it. Now, I did find one more measurement, sorry. At the foot end, the width of the sleeping compartment is 1.2 meters, and the width at the head end of the sleeping compartment only is 1.3 meters, and the length of the sleeping compartment is 2.1 meters. You guys will see what I'm talking about with the shape, how some of the dimensions are a little wonky. So let's get all of this over towards the grass and set up the tent and have a quick look at it. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is set down the ground sheet. It is important to orientate this properly. So I'm going to fan it out the best that I can and get the pegs into the ground lightly. And then we're going to go ahead and get the tent body and the poles on top of it. And then I'll reposition if needed. So for this process, you do need a few pegs. I'm just going to move them out of the way now and fan this out to kind of find the orientation, because the layout of this tent is a little bit wonky. But after you kind of play around with it a few times, it's very, very easy. So already I could tell that the head end is up here and the foot end is down towards the camera. So with the tent body pegged out over top of the footprint, we take our 3 poles. One goes crossed from peg to peg. The other goes crossed from peg to peg. And the third pole I like to set up afterwards, very last, because it actually runs across the tent in that kind of shape. So I'm just going to remove this pole right now, and we're going to set up the 2 cross poles, get them snapped into the tent body, and then we'll come in with the third pole at the very end. Okay, so once I get to this point, I have 2 poles standing up and I have them secured in each corner of the tent. I then take one of the plastic clips on the tent body on the very most bottom portion and snap those into the poles, and that'll keep the poles from falling over. I then come in with the third pole and go over top of these 2, securing it in its place just like the other 2 poles do. Okay guys, so there is the outside of the tent totally set up. It is an exoskeleton tent, meaning the tent poles right on the outside. There are no sleeves. They all click in with these plastic clips, making it very easy to set up and very easy to take down. Now we are still missing the most top portion of the rainfly. It's more of an umbrella style. And that goes on very simple and comes off very easily, opening up with 2 large mesh panels at the top to vent out a lot of condensation and allow a lot of air circulation. Now keep in mind the inner tent is removable, and that's very helpful with these poles being on the outside, meaning you can set the tent up in a downpour of rain with the inner still inside of your backpack, protected nice and dry, and then you can crawl inside and hang the mesh inner on the inside of the tent while you're already inside, protected from the rain. Alright guys, so here's the tent totally set up, minus the guy lines. There are guy lines attached to this neon webbing strap. They each have adjusters on them, making it possible to get this tent rock solid, and it will not move in wind at all. Currently set up with the ground sheet and the tent pegs in the ground, it is extremely strong and also holds up to high winds very, very well. There is 1 large door on this side and the same style on the other side, making this a 2 entry system as it is for 2 people, but I will say it is better suited for 1 person. Looking at the tent from this angle, you may be able to tell that this is a design that is copied many times with many different brands, as it is a very, very popular style of tent. Has 2 entries, as I've already stated, the removable roof making it possible to be totally protected inside from rain, yet still having a ton of airflow going inside of the tent. The guy out points and all these attachments make this tent incredibly strong. The fabric is very thick and very durable. Everything is seam taped. It stays absolutely dry, and it's a treat to be in and basically being stuck inside of here in a storm. It makes it very, very comfortable for 1 person. But like I said, it is marketed as a 2-person backpacking tent. 2 people do fit in here, but it is rather tight. So let's get these doors open and have a look inside. Alright, so opening the door is rather simple, and I mean simple as the zippers do not snag. It is very nice to open this up in the wind, in the rain, it doesn't matter. The zippers always unzip without getting snagged. Now I will point out there is a very generous rain flap up top, and it actually has an elastic built into it to help hold it down so the wind won't drive water or snow up under the weather flap and go inside. So that is a huge pro for this tent in dealing with high winds, rain, and snow. If we take the door, roll it up, there is a toggle down by the pole section. So we will toggle that in. And then there's a separate toggle for opening the mesh door, which is located right here. We have a secondary toggle here to tie that in. So as you guys can see, sitting inside of the vestibule, the ground sheet does extend into the vestibule. This is both good and bad in my opinion. For right now, it's perfect. But I find if it is heavily raining outside, sometimes water drops may land on the ground sheet, and depending on how you're pitched with the tent, they may actually go underneath of the tent. Now the tent floor and everything is totally waterproofed and seam taped, But usually when it rains, I like detaching the rain fly from this pole because it does click underneath the pole, and I take this little triangle section and I fold it underneath of the tent, leaving this area open ground. It also helps out for not damaging the floor if you're going to be working in the vestibule or even cooking inside of the vestibule. So I want to get both side doors open. We're going to unzip the mesh and have a look at the inside of the tent. Here we have a detailed look at both the guy lines. Here I have it all raveled up with the adjuster on there. We can see the toggle right here that holds the rain fly back. And then if you peek on the inside, you can see the toggle and the strap here, which then holds open the mesh door. Here we can see the plastic clip that hooks the rain fly onto the pole. We also can see right where the plastic hook is that holds the top cap on the rain fly. This simply comes off and attaches very easily and secure. This portion of the door, this weather flap, which covers the zipper, as I mentioned, it does have an elastic built inside of it, which helps that stay nice and snug to the door instead of blowing up in the wind. The hardware of the tent is very nice with some 1.8 millimeter paracord going to the stakeout point. We then have an aluminum bracket here the pole slides into, which also houses the strap for the ground sheet. And then we have this nice webbing material, micro webbing, very strong. You stretch that out nice and tight and it tells you when to stop moving that. And that's exactly where it needs to stake out, keeping this very strong. So on the other side of the tent, I'm just going to unzip this secondary door. And right away you can see what I mean by the different kind of geometry with this tent. This portion right here is just a vestibule, whereas this portion over here is a large door area. And that's kind of the difficult part in getting the measurement for the tent, is because this part protrudes out. This is the doorway and this is a non-doorway. However, on the inside of the mesh inner tent, there are two zippers which you can then unzip all the way up to the head end and all the way down to the foot end, giving you a massive entry inside of the inner tent. To unzip the inner tent, you will notice that there are three zippers here. One goes that way, one goes this way, and one goes up. I find it easiest to unzip the upper zipper first and then work the two side zippers, granting full access or partial access into the mesh inner. The zipper down along the bottom is a rather long zip, so it does unzip from the center all the way out. And then this upper zipper is more of a D kind of configuration, and that gives you a very large opening to get in and out of the tent. And once I pin this back, you can get an idea of how large the living space is inside of this tent. Now, like I said, this secondary panel here can unzip. However, there's no real way to hold it open. There's no toggle to hold it open. So what I end up doing is balling up the zipper, and I actually cram it inside of one of the elastic holders that holds the inner tent to the outer tent, and it seems to hold it out of the way as long as it's not too windy and breezy, but it does grant more access to kind of come in and out. But essentially I usually leave it zipped shut just like this and leaving this wide open to come in and out of the tent. Coming inside of the tent, up top at one end of the tent, we do have a very large pocket. The whole upper portion of the tent is all mesh, and the lower portion is this 4-season material, which is excellent in the rain and very good at blocking wind. But we do have a very large pocket up here. One other thing I want to point out is how much clearance is in between the fly sheet and the inner tent. There's a good 4 to 5 inches in some spots of clearance, which makes condensation in this tent not a problem at all. At either end of the tent, both the head end and the foot end, down here near the bottom, there is a very large pocket in here, which is good for storing any kind of camp items. And I'm just going to crawl inside of here just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of how one person would fit in here. Now, I do have my head pushed up to this end. I've got about 1.5 feet more down that way. But if I zip this door shut, you can kind of get the idea that 2 people in here is very, very close. It's a very cramped setting. However, if I move my body towards the middle, this is an absolute perfect shelter for one person. So again, I just want to run this scenario. I'm placed in the center of the tent a little bit farther so you guys can see a little bit more clear. One person laying down inside of here, you have ample amount of room. Often what I like to do is place my sleeping pad to one side and then keep the other side of the inner tent as a working area. And I often keep my shoes and backpack both inside of the inner tent rather than leaving it outside where wood ticks are going to get on it, possibly have mice or other insects and bugs get into your gear. It's never fun having to deal with that. So I usually keep my stuff inside of the tent, and I find this tent is the absolute perfect size for one person. However, it does work for two people. It's more of a crawl inside and go to sleep style tent with the second person. But with one person, you could be stuck in here during a rainstorm, a snowstorm, and ride it out no problem. So right here is kind of an interesting angle. You guys can get the idea of the width of the sleeping compartment. You can also see the reach of the vestibules and how wide the tent is for when you're going to be pitching it. You do need quite a large area to pitch it, but the sleeping area is generous. You can see the logo right here, Kazoo Outdoors. This is actually the very first product from this company that I've ever used, and I have to say I am very pleased with it. One very interesting trait to this tent that I really enjoy is you can actually remove the entire inner tent and just use the outer tent with the ground sheet. Very simple to take apart. All you have to do is reach inside. You'll find it a shock cord and a little black toggle. You pass that through the ring all the way around the tent, completely disengaging the inner tent just like that, and that falls out, and then you can use the tent fast and light, or you can even pitch this separately in a rainstorm, as I mentioned earlier on. So here's a different angle from looking up at the ceiling. Right now we're looking through one door, and I've got my hand looking out the other door. We can clearly see that plastic hook, and the amount of room that is in between the inner tent and the outer tent is massive, creating a lot of airflow. All right, so now that we've taken a look at the inside and the outside of the tent, I'm now going to take the tent down, bring it back over to the tabletop, and give you guys my final thoughts, pros and cons, and what I think about the Kazoo Outdoors tent. Alright guys, so that was fairly simple for a review of the Kazoo Outdoors two-person backpacking tent. Let's talk about the pros and cons. So, as you guys would have noticed during the demonstration there, this is a very recognizable design, and there are many companies out there that are using this design. Some companies are very, very known and very reputable. However, they do this in using very, very lightweight fabric. So this tent coming in at a little heavier on the scale, over 5 pounds, what you're getting with that is durability. And that is something that I can really appreciate, because I've stood in this tent, walked through the tent with my shoes on rock, and there are no holes in the bottom of this. So this is definitely my style. It is a very durable fabric. It is very waterproof. It is reinforced all over every area where it needs to be. The ground sheet is incredible, all seam taped, everything works really well. I would like to see some toggles added to the secondary door panel right where that zipper is, to kind of roll it up and toggle it in place. That way the whole inside of the tent is wide open and pinned back. However, it's not a deal breaker. It's simple to just get in and zip it shut and off you go. There's a very large doorway to the tent to get in and out, so it really doesn't bother me. As far as the vestibule areas, there is ample amount of room to put your gear in or outside of the tent. The vestibule is very large. I have cooked inside of the vestibule a number of times with the canister stove. It works totally fine. One more addition would be a two-way zipper on both doors entering the outer tent. So if we'd be able to unzip the top of the tent to vent it out, so if you do have a canister stove inside of the vestibule and you're cooking, you don't want all that steam build up inside of the tent. It would be nice to have a two-way zipper to zip it down and open it up to vent out. Other than that, I'm really digging it. I've got to say, I really do enjoy the tent. The green and the red. The green and that kind of purplish red is very, very nice. Very recognizable of some other gear manufacturers as well. But with that little touch of orange, I feel it jumps, and it just, I really do enjoy it. It blends in very nicely. It's not a very bright tent, and it's very strong. It's strong and it's waterproof. So 2 thumbs up for me on the Kazoo Outdoors two-person tent. If you guys have any more questions, please drop it down in the comment section and I'll get back to you. That is all I got today, and I am in a hurry because it is going to rain like crazy. The sky is getting very dark. So thank you very much for enjoying, and I'll catch you in the next video.